All right, everyone, welcome back. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into something uh, pretty heavy, actually. We're going to be talking about the conflict in Ukraine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but we're going to be looking at it through a really interesting lens, and that is game theory.
Okay.
So we're talking about strategic decision-making between some pretty major players, specifically Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin,
I see.
and the choices they make, even hypothetical ones, about a possible Trump return could really have a huge impact, a ripple effect for global stability.
Interesting.
So are you ready to get strategic with me?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm ready to dive in. It's fascinating how game theory can be applied to a situation like this. It's like, imagine a game board where Trump and Putin, they each have two moves. They can either choose to escalate the situation in Ukraine, or they can choose to de-escalate. And so the source material that we're looking at today actually maps out these four possible outcomes based on what choices they make.
Okay, so let's actually play this out, right? Let's look at scenario number one. Let's say Trump's thinking, okay, let's cool things down. I want to be the peacemaker. So he goes for de-escalation. But on the other side of the board, Putin, he sees an opportunity. He decides to escalate. What happens then?
That's where it gets really interesting because by escalating, Putin actually gains a stronger position. He's showing that he's not backing down and he's putting himself in a good spot for, future negotiations. And now a potentially more conciliatory Trump is kind of like on the scene. He's ready to negotiate.
So Putin gets to look tough, and then Trump kind of gets to swoop in, be the hero, bring everybody back from the brink.
Exactly.
But what about Ukraine? They're kind of caught in the middle of all this.
Exactly. For Ukraine, it means a tougher fight in the meantime. They would need even more support from allies, just to hold their ground while all this is happening.
Because every delay gives Putin more leverage.
This
Okay, so scenario two. Both Trump and Putin decide to double down. They both choose escalation. What are we looking at? What kind of world are we looking at then?
Now we're talking about a prolonged conflict and a very costly conflict, not just for Ukraine, but for the entire world.
And for Ukraine.
It's kind of a mixed bag because more U.S. involvement might mean more military aid, but it also means a longer war. It could really stretch their resources thin.
It's a tough situation. So we've seen two scenarios where things escalate. What happens when one or both players decide to take a step back? We're going to unpack that when we come back.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
So we just explored a couple of pretty intense scenarios, right, where either Trump or Putin or both chose to escalate the conflict in Ukraine.
Yeah.
But as promised, let's flip the script a little bit. Let's
Well,
see what happens when de-escalation is potentially on the table.
yeah, because it can't all be doom and gloom.
Right.
So scenario three, Trump still aiming for that diplomatic win,
Uh-huh.
is leaning towards de-escalation, and this time Putin follows suit. What happens when both sides kind of pump the brakes a little bit?
Now, this scenario has the potential to be a win-win for everybody involved. It opens the door for some productive peace talks,
Okay.
allows Trump to really step into that global peacemaker role.
So a chance for Trump to maybe boost his image a little bit,
Yeah.
and for Putin to kind of save face without appearing weak.
Exactly.
Sounds good so far.
Right.
But what about the people who matter most in this equation?
Yeah.
What does de-escalation mean for Ukraine?
De-escalation would mean a chance for Ukraine to finally breathe.
Okay.
It would allow them to start rebuilding.
Yeah.
Maybe even return to some sense of normalcy. And it would also give them valuable breathing room to negotiate from a position of strength.
Okay, so this scenario seems like the best case scenario. Everybody kind of walks away with something.
Potentially, yeah.
But you mentioned earlier that in game theory, there are always risks and rewards to consider.
Of course.
What's the catch here?
The big question mark is whether Putin will actually choose to de-escalate. We have to consider his past actions, what he's trying to achieve.
Right.
It's a potential path to peace,
Uh-huh.
but there's no guarantee he'll take it.
Right. Relying on Putin to play nice is probably not the best strategy.
Probably not.
So let's look at our final scenario.
Okay.
What if it's Trump who decides to kind of keep the pressure on, maybe even escalate things, while Putin chooses to de-escalate?
Interesting.
It's almost the reverse of what we discussed earlier.
Yeah, this scenario is particularly interesting because it flips the power dynamic. If things are calmer on the ground,
Uh-huh.
Trump has more leverage to push for concessions from Russia,
I see.
potentially securing some major wins for Ukraine and Western allies.
So it's almost like using a moment of calm
Hmm.
to strategically maneuver yourself into a stronger position.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And for Trump, it reinforces his image as a strong leader who's not afraid to use American power and influence on the global stage.
Hmm. It's fascinating how each choice has such a ripple effect, not just on the immediate situation, but on the players' reputations and global perceptions of power.
Yeah.
What would this scenario mean for Ukraine?
For Ukraine, this could be a chance to secure some long-term stability and support. It's an opportunity to rebuild and regain their footing, knowing they have strong backing from the international community.
Okay, so we've played out all four scenarios,
They have.
escalation and de-escalation from both sides.
Right.
What's the main takeaway here?
These scenarios highlight the complexity of this conflict and the wide range of potential outcomes.
Yeah.
But there's a crucial thread that runs through all of them:
Okay.
the urgent need to support Ukraine right now.
We've talked about the strategic reasons, but in this last part, let's get to the heart of the matter.
Sure.
Why is supporting Ukraine not just a strategic move, but a moral imperative? We're back, and we've spent a lot of time talking about strategy and potential outcomes.
We have.
But this whole conversation, this whole deep dive, has really been building to this. Why does supporting Ukraine matter? Not just, like, geopolitically,
Yeah.
but on a human level.
I think it's easy to get caught up in all the game theory stuff.
Yeah.
And all the moves and counter moves and forget that there are real people
Right.
at the heart of this.
It's easy to get desensitized when you see those same headlines every single day.
Yeah.
But we're talking about families forced from their homes,
Okay.
communities torn apart.
Yeah, the constant fear
Right.
of not knowing what tomorrow will bring.
That's the reality.
That's people's lives right
And
now.
that's why supporting Ukraine transcends politics.
It does.
It's about standing up for these fundamental values:
Yeah.
freedom, peace, the right of a nation to determine its own future.
Absolutely.
And frankly, values that impact all of us,
Yeah.
not just those involved in the conflict.
I think that's such an important point because, we may feel removed from it here, but the erosion of those international norms,
Right.
the idea that a country can just invade another without consequence, that impacts everybody's sense of security.
It's a scary thought.
It is.
But I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed by it all. Like,
yeah.
what can I do?
Yeah,
My individual actions aren't going to really make a difference.
sure.
What would you say to those people?
I would say that every act of support,
Yeah.
no matter how small it is, contributes to a larger movement.
Okay.
It sends a message that aggression won't be tolerated,
Right.
that we stand in solidarity with those who are fighting for their freedom.
And there's so many ways to show support:
Absolutely.
donating to humanitarian organizations,
Uh,
raising awareness, even just having these conversations,
right.
educating ourselves about the situation.
It all matters.
It makes a difference.
Even the source material highlights organizations like Ukraine Boost.
Oh, yeah.
You can buy everyday products, things you'd normally buy anyway, and the proceeds go directly to initiatives that are supporting Ukraine.
I like that.
It's a way to integrate support into your daily life.
So it's not just about these grand gestures. It's about making conscious choices
Exactly.
that align with our values.
Uh-huh.
Every little bit counts.
Every little bit counts.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with kind of a final thought.
Okay.
We've analyzed these scenarios, these potential futures,
Right.
but the future isn't predetermined. It's shaped of the choices we make today,
It is.
individually and collectively.
Yes.
What kind of world do we want to live in, and what role are we willing to play in creating it?
Those are powerful questions, and I hope our listeners will continue to explore them.
Yeah, keep learning, keep engaging, keep asking those tough questions,
Absolutely.
because ultimately the fight for a more peaceful and just world belongs to all of us.
It does.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time as we continue to explore these forces shaping our world.